1989's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for arcades was a coin-op colossus for Konami. Arriving as the popularity of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird's radical reptiles was reaching its peak, the thirst for the original TMNT cabinet was so great, Konami couldn't even keep up with the demand. With additional production outsourced, tens of thousands of TMNT cabinets were ultimately sold worldwide, and it would go on to become Konami's highest-grossing arcade game ever. In 1991, Konami found success again with the fondly remembered follow-up Turtles in Time, which improved on the formula and is still largely considered the most legendary TMNT game of all. 3 decades and several reboots later, Montreal-based studio Tribute Games has taken the Turtles back to where they began with Shredder's Revenge, a spiritual sequel to Konami's stone-cold arcade classics. Shredder's Revenge is proof positive that there's no school like the old school. But assembling a brand new brawler in the shadow of 2 of the biggest and best beat-em-ups ever built is no trivial task. To find out how Tribute Games pulled this off, we talked to narrative designer Yannick Belzil about what it took to contemporize the classic coin-op characteristics of the original TMNT games and the challenges of returning to the 1987 animated universe. We also analysed the level Crisis at Coney Island and its flawless fusion of retro tropes and modern flourishes, all in a setting that pays perfect tribute to the earliest roots of the beat-em-up genre in the iconic 1979 cult film The Warriors. This is Art of the Level.
Let's kick some shell!
Now, nostalgia is a powerful drug, and it's important not to gloss over the fact that there are key elements of Konami's coin-operated TMNT beat-em-ups that do fall down under modern scrutiny. These games had glorious wide appeal, and they were bona fide pioneers of frantic 4-player fun, but they weren't just built to entertain disaffected Generation X teens and their little brothers and sisters. They were built to take their money. These cabinets needed to generate income for arcade operators, and they did it very effectively. In the proto-pay-to-win cauldron of 80s and 90s arcades, games weren't always concerned about fairness. First and foremost, they wanted our cash. This is something Tribute needed to consider when building Shredder's Revenge, which obviously isn't driven by the economics of 20th century arcades. It didn't have to be unnecessarily hard at all times.
I think for us it was to make it more forgiving as a beat 'em up in a sense, or I guess more generous would be a better way to put it, is that let's say in these old, in these classics, when you fight foot soldiers, you have to be very precise, like access-wise. Like you really have to be like right in front of the foot soldier. Same thing for the jump kick attack, which depending what kind of player you were, but me and my cousins were big jump kickers back in the day, but you really had to be precise to attack the enemies. So one main thing that we do fighting wise is sort of the I guess the fighting circle around our character is like more generous, so you don't have to precisely align with the foot soldier to hit them. Like if there are a couple of pixels or degrees off, you can still hit them and get them. One thing that we really want to do with this version of the Turtles is to not make them frustrating. You have to feel like a powerful combatant when you're fighting, so that's part of it. So the hitting is more generous, and I would say also a part of that, it's making sure that the game is more accessible to a younger audience that might want to play, that will be interested by our colorful graphics. So I would say that it's the main fighting part of how we make Shredder's Revenge different from the previous games. We have like dodges, we have specials with different types of energy bars, but to me, like the key one, like the one I notice when I play back, say, Turtles in Time after working on Shredder's Revenge, is really like that precision of hitting and fighting. You also have to remember that they were made to be in arcades and to separate us from our quarters, so they had that sort of difficulty
So while Tribute clung on to the classic look of Konami's TMNT arcade games, the studio cast away the most doggedly unforgiving parts of their designs. The result is a game that looks right but doesn't play like a relic, and a game that's simultaneously more accessible than its ancestors but also has a higher skill ceiling thanks to a raft of new moves and abilities. Instead of making it difficult to avoid taking damage, Shredder's Revenge adds an effective dodge to the Turtle team's repertoire, as well as a handy rising attack and charged strikes. The combat experience is far more robust and rewarding as a result, especially when you add the tweaks to the way special attacks are handled. For instance, in the original home console versions of the TMNT games, Konami eventually introduced powerful special moves, but triggering them meant sacrificing a segment of your health bar. Through a modern lens, that's just needlessly punitive. Sure, it makes sense to limit special moves, but it would also make sense to position them as rewards rather than punish their use. It's a disincentive to use your character to their full potential. In Shredder's Revenge, special attacks are assigned to a separate bar, which fills as you apply turtle wax to the waves of enemies. You need to land consecutive hits to fill the bar and bank the special move for later use, but unless you play on the lowest difficulty setting, it will reset if you take a blow before it's fully charged. It's a balance that rewards both aggression and shrewd play, and that doesn't punish players for pushing their character to the limit. It's still entirely possible to plow through Shredder's Revenge like a 90s button basher, but there's a clearly evolved experience beneath the surface. As Belzil explains, shedding that unfairness was a deliberate step in making Shredder's Revenge a game that matched players' memories of the magic in the old games, however rose-tinted those recollections might be.
Playing the old games, you see they are less forgiving and they're stiffer than you might remember. So it's really making a game that feels how you remember playing it, but not necessarily how you actually played it. So it's making it more explosive, more colorful, a bit wilder. Everyone had to interrogate their own memories of playing these games and see how we could make a game that matches up to these memories.
However, while studying these original games, Tribute still came to respect plenty about what Konami achieved with the resources and technology it had available to it at the time. And it's easy to see how the company was able to use its TMNT games as a springboard to work with a range of other partners on a stream of licensed beat-em-ups in their wake.
They did so much with, comparatively to what resources we have, so little. They were really able to create evocative worlds and characters with the sprites, with just a little bit of sound effects or voice acting. But you see how sturdy the Konami beat-em-up machine was still back then, because they eventually they put a lot of different franchises on it, on different arcade games, like for The Simpsons. There was pretty solid Batman Returns game on Super Nintendo as well. It's an engine that is really, really strong, but that also has a lot of give to be added upon or being a bit modernized with the different tastes of the times.
There are 16 levels in Shredder's Revenge, and together they take between 2 to 3 hours to tussle through, making it a considerably longer and bigger experience than the TMNT games from the golden era of beat-em-ups. Now, admittedly, there are only really two types of stages, traditional ones and high-speed hoverboard levels, but there's a pretty bodacious blend of backdrops as the Turtles and their allies battle through the Big Apple, Brooklyn, and beyond. One such standout is Episode 9, Crisis at Coney Island. As Belzil explains, Coney Island in Shredder's Revenge was built to be both reverent to the world-famous amusement park as it existed in the 80s, but also to inject Shredder's Revenge with the kind of iconic New York landmarks that were sometimes surprisingly absent from the 1987 cartoon series.
Creating our version of Manhattan was a lot of fun. As a narrative designer, I also get to design the progressions in the levels, from what environment you will go from one part to the other. And part of my job is doing a lot of research so I can suggest a lot of stuff for the background artists and what are they going to draw. So let's say for our Coney Island level, then I go look at a whole bunch of pictures of what Coney Island looked like in the 80s, and then I just throw a lot of that reference to our wonderful artists, and these guys then will pick and choose what they like and bring that into the decor. So when you watch the 87 cartoon, they live in an iconic cartoon city, but it doesn't truly feel entirely like New York. Maybe you see like the Statue of Liberty once or twice, a couple of times, but it just feels like a big cartoon city. So one thing that we wanted to add was stuff that was appropriate from the era, so types of stores or parking garages or the types of cars you would see, but put them through an 87 Turtles cartoon lens. I mean, beat 'em ups are always gonna have city streets where you fight, so it was trying to add a smidge more of real city flavor to these city streets type of levels.
Like every level in Shredder's Revenge, it's a killer cocktail of both the standout new combat and a constant barrage of callbacks to the classic games and cartoons. For instance, beyond the plentiful punk frog references, the suspiciously highlighted lengths of timber on the iconic boardwalk, which will burst up and bang your character in the face, are a nod to the nefarious loose planks on Turtles in Time's pirate ship level.
Duh, my nose.
Any player of Turtles in Time is almost guaranteed to give these a wide berth automatically, even 30 years later. Crisis at Coney Island is also a great example of how Tribute Games varies its enemy spawns so they're not always shuffling onto screen from the left or right. In this level, foot soldiers are also found manning sideshow stalls, gormlessly licking ice creams, or standing idle, distracted on Game Boys.
One good trick that was really useful is that we have a lot of unique spawns for our bad guys, for our foot soldiers. So because they show up by coming from left and right in the screen a lot, but it's not the only way they appear in screen. Sometimes they drop from the roof, sometimes they're already lounging in the level, they're playing Game Boy or they're doing something else that's a bit funny. So that sort of tricks you into thinking that it's not a regular spawn, it's just a funny scene, and thus it cuts the monotony, the possible monotony of the beat 'em up grind.
The genesis of Crisis at Coney Island's boss fight with Leatherhead is also an interesting one. As Belzil describes, sometimes working backwards from bosses during development.
I knew that the level boss for Coney Island would be Leatherhead, who's an alligator, and then I looked up what alligator nests look like online, and then alligator nests are this, there's a lot of straw and grass that they were sort of wrapped around themselves, and I thought, oh, that might look like being inside a roller coaster structure, which there is in Coney Island. So when I create the level, sometimes I think of the boss arena and go backwards. But this one was sort of reversed, but when I thought, oh, we could fight Leatherhead in the guts of a roller coaster, and that's going to look interesting. And then I could make it go like, you go from the sunny beach to a more shadowy area of the level, so there's some sort of progression. And so stuff like that, immediately it becomes visual. Other game designers will have ideas to add stuff in there. Artists will find something interesting to draw in there. And when you have that cooking, like, you know you have a good level idea then.
I feel like gumbo.
Now, of course, we can't talk about Coney Island and beat 'em ups without mentioning The Warriors, the 1979 cult action thriller from Walter Hill. In case you're unfamiliar with it, based on Sol Urich's 1965 novel, The Warriors is the gritty story of a tightly knit street gang who are framed for the murder of an enigmatic rival gang leader and must fight their way across New York to escape, from the Bronx to Coney Island. The basic similarities between the Warriors' slog through the city and the Turtles' battle through the Big Apple and Shredder's Revenge notwithstanding, the film did have a huge influence on video games, alongside 1984's Streets of Fire, which was also directed by Walter Hill. The street-level skirmishes, colourful gangs and brutal beatdowns provided some of the most important blueprints for the emerging beat-em-up genre, and Belzil explains it was a feeling they wanted to have in the game.
The Warriors feeling, I don't think it's an accident, because I feel like every single beat 'em up is indebted to the Warriors. I guess Double Dragon is Streets of Fire and it's the Warriors. It's both those movies like combined together.
As far as tributes to the Warriors go, Crisis at Coney Island obviously can't quite measure up to the very best of them, but it is a major nudge and wink that's hard to miss if you know your genre history. But the Warriors isn't the only stimulus for Shredder's revenge, and Belzil also looked to important Hong Kong cinema for inspiration, including 1980s martial arts trailblazer Cynthia Rothrock when it came to bringing credibility to April O'Neil's New Combat.
One big thing that I did a lot before starting working on the game is watching and rewatching a lot of Jackie Chan movies and a lot of Corey Yuen movies, like the Hong Kong action of the 80s and 90s, because the first Turtles movies is co-produced by Golden Harvest, which was like the place that produced Jackie Chan movies. And say for the mall level, I remember like just putting a link to the mall fight in Police Story 1 and saying like, if we could have a whole bunch of breaking glass like that would be pretty sweet. And then it was like, we couldn't, because I feel like there's probably like graphics issues and sound effects. Having unending breaking glass in a video game would get pretty tiring. But it's trying to recreate the mall from that. These fight-based movies, finding what's special about them, and sometimes, you know, it's the way new goons would come in from nowhere to try and fight Jackie Chan in Police Story. So trying to add a bit of that flavor in the Foot Soldier when they pop out. It's really like trying to get from influences from these type of movies. Like one other big one is that I like to say is the movie Yes Madam with Cynthia Rothrock and Michelle Yeoh. Like when we were designing April O'Neil, my main contribution to the discussion was like, she should fight like Cynthia Rothrock in Yes Madam. Like that's how she should fight. And so yeah, it's also taking ideas and inspiration from pop culture that was around at the same time as the Turtles, not just the Turtles themselves, and trying to filter that back into the game.
As far as we're concerned, returning to the pixel aesthetic of the TMNT games that ruled arcades back when Turtle Fever was gripping the globe was a great move for tribute games. But make no mistake, just because Shredder's Revenge is designed to feel like it could have been plucked directly from 1992, as Belzil explains, this retro revival is not something the studio opted for because it's easier.
I feel like there's a misunderstanding about the pixel art style. Like first, here at Tribute Games, like that's all we've done so far. Like that's what we love to do. Our founders like left the big companies because they thought that they would not be able to do pixel art games anymore. That's where our heart lies. In fact, that's our company logo is a pixelated heart. So that's not for nothing. So for us, using that type of art is not a fad or a way to cash in or create nostalgia. Like that's what we'd be doing anyways. And I feel like in this era of massive realistic graphics, people will think that it's easy to do 2D art and pixel art, but it's extremely time consuming. I feel like one playable characters for TMNT takes a couple of months to be constructed because they all have specific animations. Like the 4 turtles share a couple of frames, but really not that much because they all have different run cycles, different attacks, different moves, different taunts, cheerful animations at the end of the level. So it's traditional animation in a sense, and it's a lot of work. So it's fun to see people being really excited about the game, and people ask us like, oh, can you have this new character playable, add this character playable, had the punk frogs as 4 playable characters, and it's like, we'd love to, but this will take months and months and months because we want it to be almost bespoke in a way, that they're not mailed in, that they're lovingly made and filled with character.
Thanks for watching this installment of Art of the Level. If you're interested in learning more about how key levels of your favourite games come together, check out our previous episodes on Sifu's clever use of homage to teach players how to fight, and the secrets behind Uncharted 4's dramatic downhill chase sequence. For everything else, stay on IGN.